She hadn't said a word the whole flight, just sat quietly in seat 18A, put up headphones and eyes closed. Then 20 minutes before landing, the captain slurred his words over the intercom and collapsed. Panic spread through the cabin. Flight attendants froze. That's when the girl stood up calm as ice and walked to the cockpit. She didn't ask, she didn't hesitate, she just flew. If you believe Quito isn't mean incapable, type seat 18A below. Flight 480 from Phoenix to Denver had been smooth, cloudless skies, half-full cabin routine. Tuesday afternoon service with experienced crew and minimal turbulence. In seat 18A, a young woman, early 30s, black windbreaker, worn military boots, low ponytail, secured with a simple elastic band, sat completely alone in her row. She boarded late, moving through the jet bridge with deliberate steps, tucked her single canvas bag under the seat in front of her, and avoided all eye contact with passengers and crew members alike. Flight attendants automatically marked her as no trouble during their mental passenger assessment. Other travelers didn't glance twice at the unremarkable woman, who seemed determined to remain invisible. Row 18 was strategically positioned at near the emergency exit, just 3 rows behind the wing, close enough to feel engine vibrations through fuselage. She declined drinks during beverage service, declined snacks when the cart rolled by. The only thing she accepted was a small cup of water, and even then with nothing more than a question of acknowledgement. The flight crew casually joked about her during downtime in the galley, the way service workers dodo pass time on routine flights. Seat 18A looks like she's running from something, whispered Sarah, the lead flight attendant. Probably just another gamer. Heading to some convention, laughed Mark, adjusting his tie. Or maybe a veteran with bad memories who doesn't like crowds, suggested Lisa, then West crew member. No one knew her name. She wasn't listed on any airlineality program database. No special flags in the system, no security notes, no meal preferences, just one weathered bag, one black jacket, and dog tags tucked carefully under her shirt, completely unseen by casual observation. Her boarding pass showed only O'Reilly, seat 18A. No special services required. She kept her eyes closed for most of the flight, occasionally shifting position, but never removing her headphones or engaging with anyone around her. The businessman in 18BB tried to make small talk during takeoff. She responded with a polite but firm shake of her head, then turned toward the window. For 2 hours and 37 minutes, she remained the most forgettable passenger on Flight 482, until everything changed. The captain's voice came over the intercom at 3:42 p.m. Mountain Time, exactly 18 minutes before scheduled arrival. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our descent into Denver International Airport shortly. Please secure your. His words began to slur noticeably. Silence stretched for several uncomfortable reasons. Then came the static. A dull thump echoed from somewhere behind the cockpit door, and suddenly the cabin filled with the kind of chaos that turns routine flights into nightmares. Passengers looked around nervously. Someone dropped their magazine. A child started crying in row 12. The woman in seat 18A opened her eyes for the first time in over an hour. She listened carefully to the sounds around her: engine pitch, air circulation, the subtle vibrations that indicated aircraft status. Her hand unconsciously moved to touch the dog tags hidden beneath her shirt, and for the first time since boarding, she looked alert, completely, intensely alert, because she recognized the signs of an emergency before anyone else on the plane even understood what was happening. When systems fail and leadership is needed most, it doesn't always emerge from the expected places or the loudest voices. Flight attendants rushed toward the cockpit with urgent professional movements that immediately signaled something was seriously wrong. A few seconds later, Sarah, the lead flight attendant, ran back down the narrow aisle with her face pale and her composure completely shattered, shooting desperately. "We need any pilot. Anyone. Do we have a licensed pilot on board?" Passengers began to panic with the sudden realization that their lives might be in genuine danger. An elderly man in row 5 stood up quickly, then sat back down again, Hands visibly shaking, one mother clutched her toddler tightly against her chest, whispering frantic prayers under breath while tears started forming in her eyes. Seatbelt lights continued blinking useless overhead. The second officer was completely locked out of the cockpit. No emergency override available from outside the flight deck. Someone pressed the attendant call button repeatedly, creating an annoying electronic chime that added to the growing atmosphere of panic and confusion. A businessman shouted, "What's happening? Why won't anyone tell us what's happening?" Amid all the noise, confusion, and rising panic, the woman in seat 18A stood up slowly and deliberately, no visible expression on her face. She stepped carefully past her roommate, who was frantically checking his phone for signal, and walked calmly toward the front of the aircraft through the chaos. When she reached the galley area, she spoke 6 words in a voice that cut through the noise. "Open the cockpit, I can fly." The flight attendant stared at her like she had just claimed to be an alien from another planet. "Ma'am, you don't understand the situation," Mark started to explain. "Military lock system overrides from inside only. Just pop the inner access panel and step back immediately," she interrupted with technical precision. Her voice was low control, precise, carrying an edge of authority that no one questioned despite her unremarkable appearance. Sarah hesitated for exactly 3 seconds, looked into the woman's steady eyes, then made a decision that would save everyone's lives. A few seconds later, the cockpit door clicked open with a mechanism. The woman from 18A stepped in without ceremony or explanation. The captain was unconscious, head tilted at an unnatural angle, skin pale and breathing shallow. The co-pilot was frantically talking on the radio with ground control sweat dripping down his forehead. The instrument showed altitude dropping steadily. Autopilot was disengaged. The aircraft was beginning to lose stable flight configuration. The woman in the black windbreaker took a comprehensive look at the control panel, processed the information instantly, and slid into the captain's seat like she had been doing it for decades. She didn't ask permission from anyone. She didn't introduce herself or explain her qualifications. She simply reached for controls and said with absolute calm, "I've got the aircraft." The co-pilot paused. His radio communication tarred at her with a mixture of relief and confusion, then nodded once. "Roger, you have the aircraft." From that moment forward, no one questioned who she was or whether she belonged in that seat. Real strength doesn't announce itself with noise, credentials, or dramatic speakeasy. It steps forward quietly when no one else can move, takes control when chaos threatens to consume everything, and handles responsibility without asking for recognition. The woman from seat 18A had just transformed from the most forgettable passenger on flight 482 into the person responsible for keeping 20 people alive. And she did it with same quiet competence she had shown throughout the entire flight. If you've ever seen quiet confidence, become Mesolute command type Raven and 18A below. Air traffic control at Denver International Airport picked up an unexpected voice transmission from Flight 482 at exactly 3:47 p.m. Denver Tower. "This is temporary pilot in command taking over for incapacitation. Requesting immediate clearance for emergency priority approach runway 28 left. Flight 482. Identify yourself and state your qualifications." The woman's voice came back steady as granite. "Call sign Raven 7. Clearance request under Federal Aviation Regulation Emergency Protocol 14. A long pause filled the radio frequency. Then the controller's voice returned uncertain. "Raven 7. Say again your identification. Just clear the runway approach. I'm coming in heavy with passengers." The woman from seat 18A worked the flight controls like she was hardwired directly into the aircraft's nervous system, making micro adjustments that seemed to calm the entire plane. The co-pilot sat in a stunned silence, watching her hands move across switches and levers with practiced precision. "You're military?" Heffenly asked. "Something like that," she replied without taking her eyes off instruments. Outside, the aircraft turbulence picked up significantly as they descended through layers of unstable air when shear warnings began flashing at 5,000 ft altitude. Multiple warning lights illuminated across the control panel. In the passenger cabin, people cried and prayed and gripped their armrest with white knuckles. The plane began its descent through a swirling cloud front that would challenge even experienced psychometric pilots under normal circumstances. Riley, her first name, finally spoken aloud to the co-pilot, adjusted flap settings manually and reduced airspeed with the kind of fluidist movement that comes from thousands of hours in similar situations. She muttered quietly under her breath, almost to herself, "Come on, baby, just like Nellis. You know how to do this." A particularly rough jolt shook the anti-aircraft, causing overhead bins, turtle, and passengers to gasp in fear. "What the hell is she doing up there?" someone demanded from the cabin, their voice carrying forward. "Landing safely," Riley answered calmly into her toad set, though the passenger couldn't hear her response. She was executing a precision approach with a kind of controlled count that's only developed through training and combat situations. In life or death scenarios, the runway approached through the windscreen concrete and lights growing larger with each passing second. Air traffic control had cleared a other aircraft from the approach pattern. Emergency vehicles lined both sides of the runway, their red and blue lights flashing in preparation. At 200 feet above ground level, crosswinds Chorito pushed the aircraft sideways. Riley compensated with rudder adjustments and aileron inputs that kept them perfectly aligned with the center line. At 50 ft, she reduced power to idle and raised the nose slightly, preparing for touchdown. The main landing gear contacted their runway surface with more force than a typical landing, but perfectly aligned .no sideways motion. No dangerous bounce if that could cause loss of control. She immediately applied reverse thrust and wheel brakes, bringing the aircraft to a controlled stop, approximately 300 yd before the end of the runway. For several seconds, complete silence filled both the cockpit and passenger cabin. Noon clapped. No cheers erupted. Just two people slowly realizing they had absolutely no idea who had just saved their lives. The engine spun down total. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft with practiced efficiency. Through the cockpit windows, Riley could see paramedics rushing toward the passenger boarding bridge that was already being positioned. She completed the shutdown checklist, methodically ensured all systems were properly secured before anyone attempted to disembark. The co-pilot stared at her with something approaching awe. That was incredible. How did you? But when he turned to ask the question, the pilot's seat was already empty. The woman from 18A had vanished as quickly as she had appeared. Emergency crews warmed Flight 480 to within minutes of touchdown. Paramedics reached the unconscious captain immediately, establishing that he was still alive, but required immediate medical intervention. Airport officials and federal investigators tried desperately to reach the cockpit to interview the mysterious pilot, but the woman from seat 18A had already disappeared. A TSA security officer caught only a brief glimpse of her in terminal concourse, walking with a barely noticeable limp, single backpack slung over one shoulder, moving through crowds like smoke. A local news reporter monitoring emergency frequencies approached several passengers hoping to identify the hero pilot. "Did anyone get their name? Can you describe what happened up there?" The passengers shook their heads. No one had spoken to her. No one knew anything about her background. She didn't give interviews or statements. She simply vanished into the airport crowds as if she had never existed. But later that evening, a senior air traffic control supervisor became curious in auto research. The call sign Raven 7 through official aviation databases. These search led to a heavily classified file with restricted access levels far above a normal civilian aviation records. What found made him understand why she had spoken with such authority. Special Aviation Liaison, former 3rd Special Forces Group, attached to classified Blackbird Training Division. Current status redacted. The file contained a legend whispered among military pilots, stories of a ghost aviator who appeared during emergencies, saved lives, and left no official trace of involvement. Real name classified and redacted from all public records. Service record sealed under national security protocols. Current assignment unknown, but everyone in the aviation community remembered Flight 482. News outlets ran stories about the mystery pilot off Denver for weeks. Aviation blogs discussed the technical precision of the emergency landing. Passengers gave interviews, describing their terror and miraculous rescue. The captain recovered fully from his medical emergency, a severe hypoglycemic episode that caused temporary unconsciousness. He returned to active duty 6 months later. When asked about his rescue, he could only say, "Someone with extraordinary skill took control when I couldn't. I only life and the lives of every passenger too." However, that was the co-pilot was promoted and later became a captain himself. He never forgot the calm voice that said, "I've got the aircraft when a fairing was falling apart." Flight attendant Sarah received commendations for her quick thinking in opening the cockpit door. She often wondered what would have happened if she had hesitated or followed standard protocols. The woman from seat 18A became a legend, proof that heroes don't always wear uniforms or announce their presence. Sometimes they sit quietly in economy class, hood up and headphones in, waiting for the moment when their skills are desperately needed. Sometimes the most capable person in any crisis is the one no one notices until everything depends on their actions. Flight 482 landed safely because a ghost decided to become visible for exactly as long as necessary to save lives. Then she disappeared back into the shadows where legends live. Because that day, Somio Nextriardini flew a commercial aircraft out of disaster and left no trace except 200 people, still breathing, still alive, still grateful to a pilot whose real name they would never know. For more stories where calm hands rewriteth and subscribe to Ironheart Stories.